I was on a wildfire just south of Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah. We were in fire rigs driving to the incident area, 4 trucks in close convoy, when we heard helicopters. 8 black military choppers escorted us in formation for like 10 miles. We assumed they were just doing drills and using us for fake target practice or something. A little while later though, we were parked and about to start hiking to the fire line, when suddenly a thin column of smoke shoots probably about 200 feet into the sky. It was a good mile away, but the concussion was pretty significant when it hit us, and the noise was still ridiculously loud. We thought it was probably no big deal. We knew we were near a strike zone. A good 5 minutes later and an aircraft like nothing I've ever seen flew by us at maybe 500 feet. It was flat, black and sort of rectangular, but with fins and wells on the underside. It was moving pretty slow and was dead silent, so I have to assume it was some sort of stealth glider. It sounds ridiculous, but it immediately reminded me of a huge flying Batmobile, Tim Burton era. After that, some military personnel got on our radio frequency and instructed us to leave the area immediately. When our crew asked who it was and why they signed off, the incident commander, the guy in charge of managing the entire situation, came on the radios and said we were evacuating the area. They sent us to a completely different fire about 100 miles to the south, and never told us why except that it was a higher priority, which was bullshit. It was already out when we got there, and we just assisted the crews in the mop-up operation. The thing that confuses me about this is that if the army didn't want us to see that shit, or if it was dangerous, why didn't they keep us clear of the area in the first place? Either a communications breakdown, or they had a now shit situation going down, and had to get us out of there without warning. Edit. This is the closest thing anybody has suggested for what it could be. Kicked back on a rooftop one clear summer night in Germany, looking up at the stars. I spot a satellite up there and watch it traverse the night sky as they usually do. It just looked like a regular little old white dot in the sky. No different from a star except it moved in a constant direction at a constant speed, as satellites tend to look like from the naked eye from the ground. Suddenly, when it was pretty much directly overhead, this thing turns on a dime and moves in a completely different direction, then again and again, tracing a perfect isosceles triangle pattern. When it moved back to the point it had initially changed heading from, it up and fucking hauls ass at a much higher speed and a slightly different heading than when I first spotted it, until it dips below the horizon. At first I thought it was a surveillance satellite or a weather satellite or whatnot. Told a friend of mine who'd been in army intelligence and knows about stuff like this. He told me satellites can't manoeuvre like that at all. Claimed I'd seen a bona fide UFO. Edit 1. This was about 1995 and 96. Edit 2. I like your meteorite theory, but why would a meteorite move in a perfect isosceles triangle-like pattern? Okay, here it goes. The first time I had ever seen anything I was 7 in Houston, Texas. I used to like to climb on top of my mum's Suburban in the driveway and stare at the stars. One night I saw an intensely bright floating light over the tree line, probably about a half mile away. I hollered towards it, but nobody came to see it. I did not see anything else until March of 2008. This experience happened between the 10th and the 15th, but I can't give a specific date because I was up for 4 days trying to come up with some explanation to satisfy what I had seen. This was in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. My mother lived in a garden home community, all houses the same size, all one story, and you had a great visibility distance-wise. I walked out of my buddy's place at exactly 4 AM to a bright starry night. When I walked out, something caught my eye to the left of me. I looked over and saw a bright blue, yellow, green, white, red, orange, strobing, flashing light floating silently to the left. I stood in awe at it and did not want to go grab anyone, because I didn't want to miss anything. I watched as it passed in front of the moon behind my friend's place, and I saw the outline of the craft. It was a teardrop, sunflower seed type shape, and the craft seemed to have the lights being transmitted from the top half of it. It was almost as if it was transmitting some type of light pattern upward. It also had a dark, thin, smooth line of exhaust that disappeared 50 to 75 feet behind it. This all occurred no less than 400 yards away from me. After it passed the moon, I ran inside and grabbed someone. He saw it, but it was too far away to make out where it was. I went home, which was only a few blocks away, and looked out from the driveway the same direction the first craft had come from. I saw two dim white lights slowly coming over the horizon at a slow pace heading towards me. I then ran inside and grabbed my mother out of bed. We stood there for about 20 minutes while 5 separate crafts flew over us. First came 2, then 1, about 6 or 7 minutes apart from each other, going maybe 20 miles per hour, maybe 200 feet up and completely silent. The way that they looked from underneath was each one had 2 huge bright white lights which were maybe 30 to 40 feet across, but they were so bright it was hard to get a good estimate. They also had a pulsating red one between the white lights that dimmed and relit. I would estimate from the size of the white lights that each craft was maybe between 150 to 200 feet wide. The last craft that flew over us flew over lower and slower than the first 4 had. Then it made a noise. It let out a sound that to this day still haunts me. What I could best compare it to would be this sound. Then followed immediately after by another sound. Take these sounds, except make it digital and multiply it by 50. This was loud. And the craft did that twice. These crafts flew directly over us and I believe that the sound was an acknowledgement. Whatever was piloting it knew we were watching it. Kind of like a hello. I immediately started crying. I had no idea what I was looking at or just heard. The second big experience I had occurred a couple of weeks later. I was standing in my driveway smoking a cigarette listening to my iPod somewhere around 2 AM. I decided to pause my iPod to turn on the backlight. I waved my hand over it a couple times, making somewhat of a strobe pattern. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything come up, but I got that feeling of being watched. I looked up, and directly above me was a trapezoid-shaped craft with rounded edges that had a dark red and black pulsating glowing outline. It was like flowing electricity. It wasn't even 75 feet up. I could have hit this thing with a rock. I stood there while it hovered directly above me, completely silent for maybe 10 to 15 seconds while it made this kind of motion similar to the ball that Luke trained with in Star Wars. It hovered side to side, front to back in a smooth motion, never getting more than 20 feet away from its original position. It was extremely fascinating, but I was frozen stiff. After those few seconds I waved one hand at it in a friendly manner, and it then changed light pattern and hovered away behind my house. Upon deeper inspection, the fact that it knew that I saw it but made no effort to evade my detection makes me think it wanted me to follow it, although I was too freaked out to think about that at the time. I have seen that same craft on 3 other different occasions. Once again in Tuscaloosa, once in Hoover, and once in Bessemer. The time I saw it in Hoover was at an apartment complex at the top of a huge hill with a great overlook. It was night time when I was with friends. Over the overlook I saw a grey craft facing my direction that looked similar to a Hoth fighter. Forgive the Star Wars references. And as soon as I saw it, it took off to the right, silently, extremely quick. The times in Bessemer and Tuscaloosa, the trapezoid shape appeared in the sky solid white, stretched to twice its length, and then the bottom shot up to the front, like it hit light speed or something. I do frequently see what I like to call streaks. They look like shooting stars, only very low, move slower, but they still have tails that stream behind them. They can also appear in many different colours. One strange story is one night when I had a dream in Tuscaloosa. In the dream I couldn't see or hear anything, but I could feel things. I was laying on something cold, and I felt what seemed like rubber between my legs or on my junk. It was very strange to me, since a lot of people who report abductions report sperm and eggs being taken for breeding programs. The next morning I went to let the dog out in the backyard, which is very small. To the left of the patio there was a solid white ring in the grass that was maybe 8 to 10 feet wide. I showed my mother and she had told me that she had heard a noise that woke her up the night before, but she had just dismissed it. Another extremely confusing experience I had occurred in my driveway in Tuscaloosa. To give you an idea of where this occurred, look up Shelton State Community College. The house was less than a quarter mile from the campus in the Englewood neighbourhood. It was night time when I heard this static that I could compare to a jet. I looked over and directly above the community college was a light blue slit in the sky. I would say it was maybe 200 yards long, completely vertical, and had what looked like white electric currents coming off of both sides of it. I looked at it and maybe about 25 white things shot out of the slit to the left, one at a time, at a quick pace leaving the trail behind it that I previously talked about. After they passed, the bottom of the slit went upward until the slit closed, and it made a strange sound, and then it was gone. I've also had a bunch of experiences with orbs, some solid light that float across the sky or move in strange patterns, and some that brighten up to a great intensity and then fade as they pass. After that first big experience I started doing some research because I was so confused. I understand that I've had an abnormally large amount of experiences, and I honestly can't tell you why. I wish I could. I found a type of UFO witness called a contactee. These people are similar to abductees, except they are kept up with. I have no idea why I've had so many experiences, and I have only listed a fraction of them here. My best guess would be that since I acknowledged the presence of whatever it was I was seeing, it decided to keep up with me. It's kind of a gift and a curse. There are so few people that I can talk with about it and be taken seriously. I want to seek hypnotherapy to see if there might be anything else I could uncover. I'm grateful, but I still don't know much about my experiences. If y'all can get anything out of what I shared, then great. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. So here we go. This is a reply to another one of the questions. Really interesting story, says Wandering Cadaver. Thank you. I would be happy to read any more you might have. And here's his response. I don't even know where to start. Maybe the most enlightening experience I had was this. I used to talk about these things that were happening to anyone who was willing to listen. I've become a little more reserved from being hurt a few times opening up. It seemed to me like the more I would try to inform people about what happened, the more experiences there would be. There was this guy named Adam that I was hanging out with for a while. I took him home from a friend's apartment one night at around 3 to 4 AM, which was normal for that time period since I was sleeping until 4 in the afternoon. I'd been trying to talk to people about this stuff non-stop, and when I took him to his house, We chilled and smoked in the driveway for a minute. All of a sudden, an intensely bright light appeared over the hill that was less than a mile from his house, and we were both immediately drawn to it. I started looking around, seeing if there was anything else happening, and I looked up. Above us were two orbs pivoting around, and I drew his attention to them. I told him that I felt like they showed us that bright light to try and gauge our responses, and we just looked up and waved at the orbs. Then, all of a sudden, the sky came to life. There must have been 3 dozen orbs flying around in every which direction, and over the horizon, streaks started taking off. It was definitely a spiritual experience. I have a couple more experiences with orbs. I was on a friend's back porch who lived near me, and he and I were both very interested in the topic. We were sitting there chatting, and this bright light, maybe a couple hundred yards away, starts drifting across the sky very slowly, very low and silent. As it drifted, it brightened in intensity to the point where we couldn't look directly at it. It was an orange light colour. It stayed lit a couple of seconds and then slowly faded out, and we just looked at each other in awe. That happened there a couple more times, once upon request. Naturally, people made fun of me for claiming that these things happened to me. We were trying to explain to a couple of friends what happened when we saw the orb and they didn't believe us, so I said, "You want to see a UFO? Come over here." No idea why, I was just feeling cocky. We get to the back porch where the first experience happened, and sure enough, that light brightened up again and did the same thing. I've only had people with me for a few experiences. I've developed my own thoughts about what has happened to me, its origins, and why me. After my first big experience happened with the 5 crafts, I jumped online and started doing research. I feel almost as if I was led to this. I found this thing called the Raelian belief, or intelligent design. It basically states that ETs seeded human life on Earth through genetic manipulation, and we will eventually become so advanced that we'll seed life on other planets ourselves. It's very closely aligned with the ancient astronaut theory in stating that ETs have played a role in the development of human civilization in multiple ways. The way the Raelian belief started is from this dude, Rael, who claims he saw a UFO land in a dormant volcano in the 70s. He says he approached the craft, and out came a small humanoid-like ET that educated him about how all of our religions were wrong, and stemmed from ancient ET misinterpretation. When I looked at it closer, when you think of instances like Ezekiel being lifted into the heavens, chariots of fire in the sky, or the light that guided Moses through the desert, it's not difficult to attribute it to ETs. The interesting thing was that the ET told him that every major prophet of every religion was manipulated by ETs via thought implantation to instill spiritual beliefs that compelled them to share their beliefs in spirituality with others. Not saying that I believe any of this, but the more that I spread the word about my experiences, the more they seem to happen. I could probably write a book about all this stuff. Lol.